Welcome to MSUA's Game Changers Live, where we speak with satellite and mobile connectivity thought leaders about industry trends, new technologies, and about the future of where satellite technology is headed. I'm your host for today, Lisa Dreer, and our guest today is Tuomo Rutanen. He is the VP of Sales and Business Development at Orbit Communication Systems. Welcome to the show, Joel. Oops. Tuomo, gosh, I'm losing my mind.
You've had a busy day. No problem. Hey, thank you. It's great to be here today.
Yeah, maybe we can start by having you just give a little bit of background on yourself and Orbit.
Okay, I'll start with Orbit first. So Orbit is a technology company, predominantly in the satellite space. Company's been around for about 70 years, which is quite a legacy there. When it started, it wasn't satellites, but other things. And Orbit is based in Israel. In a town called Netanya, which is on the Mediterranean coast. And over the course of growing the company, Orbit's established a fairly sizable U.S. presence with a manufacturing facility, operations and support facility in South Florida, just north of Fort Lauderdale, a place called Deerfield Beach. But we also have operations now in the European Union, Asia Pacific as well, logistics and local support operations. So the company basically spans pretty much all the major markets that are out there in selling, delivering, and supporting its customer base. And the core focus of the business is around mobility. So really aeronautical and maritime are really kind of the key sectors that we serve today, both in the government and commercial domains. But then also we have a secondary line of business, which we call audio management systems, or some people call intercom management systems, which is audio systems that go into the cockpits of airplanes or into the back of like ISR aircraft. So, controlling and managing 7, 8 different, 9 different audio streams coming into a pilot's ear. The system takes care of how all that works and turns that kind of spaghetti into something that's common sense that people are able to understand. It's kind of a complex thing to try to explain.
Yeah,
So,
I was watching some videos.
When I was joining the company 18 months ago and it was explained to me, I still, it took me like 6 months to get it, but I do now anyway. And it's my job to get it. So, and actually go and try to explain it to people as well. So, so Orbit, one of the things I think as a company, we've got a pretty strong innovation portfolio. The company comes up with a lot of new interesting things. We've got a fairly decent patent portfolio. And we work with pretty much all the different bands of satellites out there. KU, KA. Well, we don't do L band today. We've done historically, but also exploring areas like Q band and V band, which are becoming very interesting to the industry today. And then of course, our big driver is we got to make it smaller, faster, cheaper. And so with that said, we've got a lot of new stuff coming up in the next 6 to 18 months. There'll be announcements, so stay tuned on that.
Wow, exciting.
Yeah. So a little bit about me. So my history, I've been I'll call it the wireless space for several decades now, and straddling both terrestrial mobile communications as well as SATCOM. Going back as far as when the first GSM phone call was made in Europe in the early 90s, involved in that, to the first US-based GSM technology-based telephone call in the mid 90s here in the DC area, to a lot of industry firsts out there, first US international roaming kind of operations. I was with Iridium in the late 90s when the late 90s satellite industry crash happened. Great experiences there. There's some negative ones as well. And I've been both on the operator side for mobile companies and satellite companies, as well as on the vendor side. So I've kind of had the luxury of seeing things from both sides of the coin. For an operator, there are different drivers than there are for a vendor. Of course, they have a common goal to achieve, but experiencing those kinds of things. And anyway, so that's me in a nutshell, or trying to keep it short at least.
Well, it must be really helpful to have both of those perspectives, especially now today. Could you imagine back when the downturn happened that we would be where we are today?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, these downturns are always, I think, in a way good for a lot of industries, because you really learn how to sharpen your skills, sharpen your perspective, and your view on things, and you really have to rationalize, and a lot of things that people or companies put to waste, gets kind of scraped away, and you really focus on the essence of what you need to do. So yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Well, so we invited you here today to talk a little bit about where things are headed. And maybe we can start by having you talk just a little bit about what you feel the satellite industry's role is in the future of mobile connectivity.
Okay, that's that's a very broad question, and there's many ways to tackle that, of course. But I'm a strong believer that the kind of anywhere, anytime, remote connectivity, is still the promise of mobile satellite services. You really don't need mobile satellite services in New York City or London or Paris. You've got a lot of other options to handle your communications needs there. But connecting the unconnected in areas where they need connectivity, I think, is the big thing. There are still large parts of the planet that are unconnected, and need to have connections. And certainly, mobile satellite is that filler for the terrestrial alternatives that we have out there. And I like to compare satellite a lot to mobile or terrestrial mobility, in the sense that if you look at the mobile penetration from what it was when it initially started, from a few percent now to, in some economies, being in excess of 100%. In other words, people have a phone with 2 subscriptions, or multiple phones, and all sorts of other devices. You've got a connected car, you got a connected phone, you got a connected TV, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's obviously what we hope that satellite will bring, will bring, to the world going forward.
Yeah. What do you see as some of the most significant changes that we'll see over the next, I don't know, 12, 24, 36, 5 years? What do you see coming down the pike?
Yeah, 12 to 24. Yeah, probably 18 to 36. The satellite industry, unfortunately, moves a little bit slower than some of its technology peers. But certainly, all the talk about and the current launch plans for smarter satellites, multiband satellites, so different band payloads, very, very advanced beamforming technologies to be able to point the capacity where you need. Those are all, I think, really exciting things to be following. Of course, a lot of that is going to drive the cost benefit. I think one thing that will not go away is people's tendency to look at the cost per bit, right? And that's in any wireless technology. And certainly when you're a satellite operator, your cost per bit is a key driver in your business plan. But also, the fact that the schedules, when it took before many years to launch a satellite, people are cranking those out in factories now in a matter of months, doing ride shares, and then doing condosats or shared payloads, which is not a new thing. It's happened in the past, but where people can share the same satellite bus but have multiple payloads in there. Why not? It makes perfect sense. So I think that's a bigger that'll be something that I think will help transform and change the industry. But also, the terminals need to follow suit. If you have a great, flashy, shiny new satellite out there, if you don't have terminals that can close the link and provide the service, then you got a problem. So the entire value chain, I think, is going to
What
go.
do you feel like the commercialization of space what impact is that having?
Yeah, that's interesting. When I read about it, I'm thinking, but my mind goes right back to Star Trek. Space, the final frontier. Go where no man has gone before is what I started thinking about, because of course I'm a space movie fan and addict. But there's more capital coming into the industry, which is great. New businesses, new business models, and I think we're just kind of scratching the surface here today as to what that's going to mean. Of course, hoping that the late 90s is not going to be replicated in the mid 2020s in terms of a lot of crashes and things going sideways. But fact is, and if you want to be kind of futuristic, I think we are kind of starting to outgrow the planet here. So exploring things out there, trying to find life on other planets, and those exciting things are certainly things that humanity needs to look at. if you want to be kind of futuristic here. But all of this is still going to drive connectivity. I mean, we have to stay connected. We have to communicate. There's no question about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about it from a user perspective, what is it that we need to be looking at as users as we're considering satellite services and solutions?
Well, I think at the end of the day, the end user doesn't really care what's under the hood. If you think about your mobile phone, and I keep drawing analogies to that, but that I think that's a good benchmark. It's really how fast is it? How well does it work? Does it work everywhere? And what does it cost me? Right? And from an end user perspective, those are the most important things. Certainly, in the satellite industry, then you've got the buyers who are buying this, or the engineers who are on the buying side, designing solutions for their end users or for their, for their colleagues in their organizations. And things that need to be out there are, for example, SLAs, service level agreements, that are well explained, that are pretty much watertight, and protect both parties. And those are sometimes pretty hard to come by. But the other thing I think from an end user perspective that's going to be important is what we're calling MBMO devices. So multiband, multi-orbit devices. In other words, it gives the end user the flexibility to switch a service if it's not performing to their expectations, and this will allow an end customer to transition their ship, their airplane, their Humvee, what have you, from one provider to another, without paying the huge cost associated with changing terminals, because satellite terminals still are pretty expensive. Not much different than my iPhone here, right? It's an unlocked phone, and I can take it from one carrier to another if I'm not happy, if the price is too high, things like that. So I think that's something that certainly we're seeing in some of the larger RFPs that are out there coming from different governments. They want to have that flexibility and be able to take that equipment where they want to go.
Got it. Do you think that the satellite industry from an SLA perspective, are they, I guess, behind in terms of when you compare it to, Earth-based enterprise managed services providers, right? They obviously provide SLAs for their services as well. Do you think that the satellite industry is sort of lagging what we have on Earth?
I think the satellite industry has traditionally had some challenges to keep up with some of those SLAs, because it's sometimes really difficult to forecast how much use you're going to have in a given beam in a given region. Terrestrially, if you are a cellular operator, you add more sectors to antenna, you add another antenna, and boom, you've increased your capacity. Well, it's kind of hard to do that on a satellite, right? So, but again, with some of the newer satellite technologies that are coming out there, I think that'll make it easier for satellite operators to provide better SLAs and stronger SLAs to their customers.
Right, right. So as users, when you're talking about, I don't know, shipping industry or airlines, what have you, and they're looking at what sort of terminals to install on their vessels or aircraft, what should they be looking for? I mean, I think you were kind of alluding to the ability to change bands. I think a lot of times we think, oh, well, this terminal is either a KA or KU. You're using one of those bands.
Yeah, so I think that's what a lot of folks are asking for and looking at. Certainly not everybody, and I think there's a time and place for multi-band terminals, but there's also a time and a place and a role for single band terminals. Take, for example, a business jet, where you have to have a very, very compact, small, sub 12-inch terminal mounted on the tail of the business jet, and you've got really severe weight considerations and constraints. Doing multiband is very hard with those weight and size constraints, and so probably a single band is maybe the only way to go. Whereas on a large Navy vessel, you've got deck space. I mean, you still have some weight considerations and things like that, of course, but you've got a lot more space to actually provide those capabilities. So again, it talks to the fact that you've got different environmental constraints and requirements that
Right.
in different situations and scenarios.
Are the main trade-offs that size and weight? Are there other trade-offs between having a single band and a multi-band terminal?
Yeah, I think it's just more the amount of hardware you need to have for multi-band than you have to have for single band. And yes, that also corresponds then to weight.
Yeah, of course.
And of course, having a unit that can have multiple modems attached to it, there's not much new there. That you can you have to have a modem, of course, to correspond to the network that you're connecting to, and so that's there's really not too much new there. But again, being able to orchestrate and harmonize, 3 different modems and 2 different bands and all that in a single system, or 2 systems that are backing up each other or complementing each other. That's where some of the magic sauce comes into play from the various providers out there, including Orbit ourselves and some of the service providers that use our technology today.
Sure. Okay. So when we're looking for a satellite services partner, what should users be looking for?
That's a good question. I think, well, including the aforementioned, which is, of course, an SLA, cost, capability to deliver today. I think, future proof or future capabilities. In other words, as my hunger or need or desire for bandwidth increases over time, which it does. I don't know yet of a case where people would be needing less bandwidth than before. So as my need for bandwidth increases all the time, will that operator be able to stay with me, through my through my journey of or in satcoms, and be able to provide those higher speeds and feeds down the road from in comparison to what they can do today. And so a solid roadmap, and a committed roadmap, I think, is important for many users out there.
Yeah.
And when you consider the complexities of the satellite equipment in the mobile satellite industry today, if you put it on an airplane, it doesn't just come off. It stays on there. It stays on there for a very long period of time. And so when you make that investment, you want to make sure that as your passengers or passenger continue to use the service and have increasing demands, you're able to meet it.
Yeah. What new technologies do users need to know about?
Um, yeah, so that's an interesting one, because if you think about, again, from the end user perspective, what they're using today and their user interfaces, be it on a tablet, smartphone, or PC, that's what they're interested in to make sure that those work today, right? So whether you're doing a WebEx call on your iPad or your laptop, or synchronizing data from the field, those kinds of things, what's under the hood, might not be as important for the end user, but certainly, I think what's on the horizon in terms of terminal capabilities, integration with terrestrial core networks out there, core network services, those types of things, are going to be important, because, for example, doing this interview on the technology that you're using, we have to make sure that it would work over a satellite link, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So are there things that we need to do as users to plan for the use of these new technologies? Or I guess, be ready?
Be ready. Obviously have an open mind. Look at risk. I mean, I think users today always look at risk, and look at the commitment that they make. I think the days of 5 to 10 year commitments are going to be gone pretty soon in the satellite industry, and they will be those commitment timeframes will be shortened. And certainly as standardization comes into play, which allows the interoperability of terminals, other devices on the network to operate across different satellites and bands. Similar to what the mobile industry had. If you go back and again dial back, a few decades, 3 decades, 4 decades, you had what was called IS-41 based AMPS, TDMA, CDMA, ETAX, NMT, GSM, a whole alphabet soup of stuff out there. And these are all either regional or national interest driven types of technologies for mobility. Phones were super expensive and really dumb and didn't do a whole lot, had short battery life. But as soon as the industry started gathering around common standards, such as the GSM standard, then things started to happen, and things started to get really interesting where production volumes went up because you could sell a vendor could sell their technology into multiple markets, address multiple POPs. The networks became interoperable. A cellular operator could buy from two vendors and mix and match, and keep sort of everybody honest and on the same page, if you will. And so, I think that for the satellite industry, that's a pretty important step and a pretty important evolution. I mean, I've got a couple of props here. If you remember, one of the very early cell phones was this little guy here, right? and then it was a single band 1900 or single band phone that worked either in Europe or in the U.S. And then something like this came along. Wait, up there we go. This is actually one of the first multi-band cell phones made by Bosch Telecom, which doesn't exist anymore. But it was a US-Europe compatible phone back in the mid-90s. And then, of course, the form factor started to shrink, where if you take, here we go, my iPhone, this, you're talking about a fraction of the size. And all the while that was happening, the first smartphone came out, which was this little guy right here. But it wasn't, it was a smart device where you plugged in your phone. Now that is a huge break, right?
It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah,
so little show and tell there for the audience, and I'm sure those watching the interview here today may remember some of these devices and the headaches that they brought to the users, because you really needed to have a PhD in software engineering to figure out how to make some of these things work from a data communications perspective.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh my gosh. Well, I know that there was a lot of talk about standards at Satellite this year, so I think that there's at least that talk in the industry of where things are headed in terms of standards. Yeah. So hopefully we'll see the benefits of that.
Yeah, the other interesting thing I think for end users is what's going to happen here is the business models are going to change. And it's going to get a lot easier and a lot simpler to buy satellite services than what it has been in the past. At least I think that's the hope in the end user community. And I think as an industry, we need to kind of rally around that and figure out how to make it, easy to buy and easy to understand. Because sometimes it can be pretty complex, when you factor in, price per megabyte or per megabit and, all those kinds of things. And they just want, kind of uninhibited connectivity, right? So.
Absolutely. Well, Tuomo, thank you so much for being here with us today. I really look forward to catching up again as some of these things come into reality.
Well, hey, Lisa, thank you for having me today. It was fun having this conversation, and yes, look forward to further dialogue.
Absolutely, my pleasure. I also want to take a moment to thank the Mobile Satellite Users Association for hosting these sessions. To learn more about the Mobile Satellite Users Association, visit msua.org, and you can get our weekly newsletter and also learn how to become a member of the MSUA. So go ahead and check out msua.org, and we'll see you next time on MSUA's Game Changers Live.